And a very good morning to you. How you doing? It's Sunday morning, the 8th of September 2019. It's a glorious morning here in Salford and Greater Manchester. A bit on the chilly side though. It is a bit on the nippy side this morning. But it's good to be alive, so it is. Great to be alive. Welcome to Sunday View. My name is Richie Allen, you probably knew that. I'll be with you for the next hour, looking through the Sunday newspapers, and we will be listening in to some of the morning talk programmes as well, and there's some interesting stuff in there. As usual, if you'd like to contribute something to something you'd like to say, tweet it to me. It's at Richie Allen Show on Twitter. I'll be delighted to hear from you. It's at Richie Allen Show on Twitter. A very warm welcome to Sunday View.
Asking the questions mainstream journalists will never ask. This is your Richie Allen Show on richieallen.co.uk, Fab Radio 2 in Manchester, and triggerwarning.tv. It's the Richie Allen Show, broadcasting live on richieallen.co.uk and multiple platforms around the world. And now, here's your host, Richie Allen.
And you know I love England cricket. I love my cricket, so I do. I know it bewilders my friends back home in Ireland, but I love my cricket. I think England cricketers, or the England cricket team, were praying for rain overnight as the final day of the fourth test begins right now at Old Trafford, only a mile and a half down the road from where I am. And, well, it's not looking too good for England. Anyway, I'm better off here with you, aren't I? Let's get rid of the tune. Better off with you, I think. I will watch a bit of it later on if it gets exciting. It did last time out at Leeds, didn't it? The final day for my fellow cricket-loving people. So how you doing? Good weekend? All good? No complaints? Who'd listen? That sort of thing. Weather set fair today across the UK. I'm reliably informed from my good friend Diane Denizen that it's the same in West Waterford and County Cork. Diane was on to me this morning. In fact, she was on to me on Friday. For me to mention, I don't know whether it will do any good, me mentioning it, Diane, but thanks for asking me to mention it. There will be a meeting this coming Wednesday in Bantry, beautiful town in West Cork, in Bantry, a meeting about 5G. And that's a very serious issue. So it's Wednesday, the 11th of September at the Maritime Hotel in Bantry. It'll begin at 7 p.m. sharp. That's Wednesday. And it'll go on for about 2 hours. And the leading speaker, the main speaker, is an academic from the University College Cork called Dr. Tom Butler. And he's a microwave expert. So that's very good news, Diane. I love this. I love these initiatives when you alert the public, but you do so using academic men and women. So Bantry, this coming Wednesday, 11th of September, Maritime Hotel in Bantry, 7 o'clock to about 9. The danger of 5G, what's happening with 5G, what is it, what are the health implications? The main speaker is the microwave expert from University College Cork. His name is Dr. Tom Butler. Thanks for mentioning that to me, Diane. Brexit dominates the papers, as it has done for 3 fucking years. Oh, God. But we're coming to the end of it now. The end of the misery. We Brexiteers, and we're a broad church, because you know what I am, I'm not going to say the S word again, because I know you'll throw something at your computer, your laptop, your radio, your phone. I won't say the S word, but you know where I am, or at least what I think I am. I don't know what I am really. But we're a broad church. There are others who wanted the UK to leave the European Union, and they would see the world a bit differently than me. But Brexiteers, we're like that. I know we've got animal lovers listening to the programme now, and I'm an animal lover. We're like an animal that's in agony, that has no hope of recovery, that's just begging now for the bolt to the fucking brain. You know, put us out of our misery. We know it's not going to happen. 'Twas never going to happen. So do us a favour, right? And just end it. And let's get back to the totalitarian, fascistic, what's the word I'm looking for here? Existence that we have become accustomed to. Let's look at the front page of the Sunday Times. And while we do that, let me reach... Jesus, mother. That's me banging my glasses off the microphone there, which I do regularly. Because I've got glasses like Dame Edna Everage. They come out. They're very prominent glasses. Right, so, in the Sunday Times, on the front page of the Sunday Times. The headline is Exclusive Amber Rudd Resigns. Exclusive Amber Rudd Resigns. And also Boris to break law for Brexit. Boris to break law for Brexit. Also on the front page of the Times is the headline, Labour MP is number 10's anti-Semitism czar. That's John Mann, you won't be surprised to hear. We might touch on that later on, we might not. I don't really want to go down that road. It's depressing. So let's have a look then. The front page of the Sunday Times. And I was convinced I had it here. I don't believe it. I thought I'd saved it on my tablet so I could read you some of the story. Because the Times, you see, is not free, you see. You've got to pay for the Times. And I do subscribe to it for your benefit. Let me just bring it up here now while I'm chatting with you. There you go, the Sunday Times, Tim Shipman, political editor, interview with Amber Rudd. The Work and Pensions Secretary has overnight resigned, obviously from the Cabinet and from the Conservative Party. Amber Rudd told the Sunday Times last night she was resigning from the Cabinet and quitting the Tories in disgust at Boris Johnson's purge of the party and his failure to pursue a deal with the European Union. Tim Shipman writes, in a bombshell move, the Work and Pensions Secretary said she was quitting because there is, quote, no evidence, end quote, Johnson is seeking agreement with the European Union despite claims it is his priority. In an explosive interview, Rudd attacked the Prime Minister's decision to expel 21 senior Tories last week, including Ken Clarke, Philip Hammond and Churchill's grandson, Sir Nicholas Soames. She described it as an assault on decency and an assault on democracy. That's the big story today. Everybody's covering it. The Times had the exclusive and the Times had the interview with Amber Rudd. Now, Rudd was on the Marr show this morning with Andrew Marr, and Andrew Marr asked her to confirm or affirm why indeed she has quit as Work and Pensions Secretary and why she has quit the Conservative Party.
Two things really, Andrew. First of all, the fact that 21 of my colleagues had the whip removed. And the reason they had the whip removed is the second reason that made me leave, which is they couldn't see sufficient concentration and planning on actually getting a deal. You're right, I support the Prime Minister in getting a deal and if not, leaving without a deal. But the fact is there is a huge amount of planning and preparation around no deal. I've attended a number of those meetings. We are really stepping it up, which is the right thing to do. But I have not seen enough work going into actually trying to get a deal. When earlier in the week I asked Number 10 for a summary of what the planning was for actually getting a deal, I was sent a one-page summary. So it's the combination of the fact that there's not enough work going into actually getting a deal, which is, I think, is not what the Prime Minister signed up to try to do. And secondly, the expulsion of 21 of my colleagues who are good, moderate Conservatives.
Oh, good, decent people, wholesome people. Now, Marr asks her, has she lost her trust in Johnson?
In essence, this is about trust. You are saying that you do not trust Boris Johnson to honestly try to get a deal with the EU.
Yeah, I'm not going to use that words because I believe that he is trying to get a deal with the EU. I am just saying what I have seen in government is that there is this huge machine preparing for no deal, which is fine. You might expect in the balance between getting a deal and no deal, 50-50 in terms of work, but it's not that. It's like 80-90% of government time going into preparing for no deal, and the absence of actually trying to work to get a deal is what has driven 21 of my colleagues to rebel, and I need to join them.
So you think, honestly, he is trying to get a deal? Yeah. What deal?
I think he prefers to get a deal, and the government...
So what deal is the question?
Well, that is the question. I mean...
And you have no idea?
I have no idea, because what we know is that Angela Merkel and the EU have said, give us your proposal, and we have not given them a proposal. Where is all the work that needs to be done to try and come up with alternative arrangements, for show where the landing place is, all that work that needs to go behind it? And instead, we're just hearing, we are going to get a deal, but there's very little evidence of it.
Are you going to leave politics?
No, I'm not leaving politics. I'm actually not leaving the Conservative Party. What I am doing is surrendering the whip alongside my colleagues, the 21 others, in order to stand with them. I know I couldn't carry on in the Conservative Party at such a high level and see 21 of my colleagues who are good, moderate people who also want a deal, excluded from it, and I just needed to move and stand by them. I hope that we will all be returned before a general election so we can all stand as Conservatives. I am a Conservative. I believe the Conservative Party is a force for good in our great country, and I'd like to see us in government. We have been before. We've done great things.
Free the Westminster 21. Is Rudd accusing the government of lying about wanting a deal?
In your letter to the Prime Minister, you said, "I no longer believe that leaving with a deal is the government's main objective." That is quite close to accusing the government of lying to the British people.
It's not close. It is accusing the government of lying to the British people. Amber.
Well, I'm not accusing them of lying. I am observing what I've seen.
So what do you mean by the sentence?
I'm saying that 80 to 90% of the work that I can see going on the EU relationship is about preparation for no deal. And can I just say
so
also...
it's about disproportion,
It's
really.
about disproportion, exactly. But, I mean, when this was first entered into after Boris Johnson became Prime Minister, most people would have expected, I think everybody would have expected, there to be a lot of work on trying to get a deal. A whole team of people trying to build those relationships, trying to work on alternative arrangements. And I haven't seen that.
Is the purpose of this resignation to further undermine Boris Johnson or to tilt the government's direction of policy?
The purpose of this resignation is to make the point that the Conservative Party, at its best, should be a moderate party that embraces people with different views of the EU. In the last, under the last Prime Minister, we had a lot of rebellions on EU matters. I think Jacob Rees-Mogg rebelled, I'm told, 100 times. Lots of people rebelled on her withdrawal agreement. If they hadn't, of course, we would have left the EU by now, and some of those are now in Cabinet. I think it's disproportionately unfair to single out this group who have a different view on leaving the European Union and remove the whip from them. That's the purpose, to try and get back into the Conservative Party.
In your letter, you said there is no evidence of a deal.
There is no evidence of the deal. There is no formal negotiation taking place. There were just a lot of conversations, and David Frost has been doing his best and going out there, I understand, twice a week. But I think we should be doing so much more to get the deal.
Like what, exactly? Mar doesn't jump in and say, like what? The European Union has no interest and has shown no interest since these negotiations began with David Davis. God, doesn't that feel like such a long time ago? When Davis was the Brexit secretary, they have laughed, they have mocked, they have ridiculed, they have dragged their feet. They never had any intention of doing any deal with the United Kingdom unless it was a deal that basically was Brexit in name only. That's all the European Union have been interested in. So what deal exactly? I have no time for Boris Johnson, you know this. For people joining the programme for the first time, no affiliation with any of these people. I don't support any of them. None of them. I might want the United Kingdom to leave the European Union, as I would love my country to leave the European Union. It doesn't mean that I support Boris Johnson. It means that I agree with him that we shouldn't be in the European Union. However, I wouldn't hand the reins of this country over to Boris Johnson, Jacob Rees-Mogg and their pals either. But the European Union is not interested in a deal. It has no interest in a deal. The European Union is only interested in one thing: preserving the status of the European Union and growing it still further. All this chaos, this Conservative Party implosion. Yeah, it's nice for people to say, "Oh, Richie, you predicted this right down to the complete desecration of the party. You compared it to the Labour Party in the 80s and the Social Democrats." Yes, I did. I saw that happening. No pleasure in it, though. Maybe people will wake up to it, maybe. 21 MPs fired, cabinet ministers resigning. It's chaos, but it's organised chaos. I saw it all, this realignment of politics in this country. But before the realignment of politics in this country, chaos, uncertainty, protests and riots. And all of those things are re-engaging people with politics. In the same way the Trump saga has re-engaged and reignited an interest in American people in politics. Politics is the greatest enemy of freedom. It's the greatest enemy of personal sovereignty, individual freedom. Politics has always been about the vastly wealthy, the greatest, the most powerful people in the world being able to control billions of people. That's what politics is an exercise in. What is politics? Well, it's an exercise, quite simply, in the control of billions of fucking people around the world by a handful of people. That's what politics is. It's the illusion that you are actually the master or the mistress of your own destiny. You're not. How could you be? That's what it's all about. And I know I've whinged on about this in recent times. I thought we were nearly there. We were nearly at peak oil, for want of a better way of putting it. You know, peak pissed offedness, peak realisation. We were nearly at peak realisation in the early to mid 2000s. Post September 11, more and more people were seeing through the charade. That's how we've grown up, it's how we've lived, it's how we've operated, it's how we've acted, it's how we've worked, on the premise that we are in control of our lives and our futures because we get to be democratic every few years and go and vote for these people who are given to you by the same half a dozen people with all of the world's resources and wealth. Given to you. Now go and pick from them. I don't care who you pick, by the way, because I own every fucking last one of them. That's what people won't wake up to. They're terrified of that realisation, of that reality. That's what keeps people awake at nights. And so they ignore it then. I'll have a drink, is what I'll do. I'll have a drink. I'll go to the football, is what I'll do. And all this chaos we're seeing now, this uncertainty, the protests, the riots, is actually working, not in the way it should be. It should work to, again, you know, confirm to people that it's all an illusion, but it'll go the other way. People will get more engaged with it. Brilliant series on at the moment. When I say a brilliant series, I'll come back to it later on. I've been watching this Showtime this Showtime drama about Fox News and Roger Ailes, starring Russell Crowe and Naomi Watts and Sienna Miller. I might come back to that before the programme is over. It's very interesting. And it ties up a lot of what I'm talking about today. So this chaos, people are just getting more and more energised in it. And are dividing themselves, you know, even more thinly. Communities dividing themselves even more thinly among new and more exotic identity groups as time goes on. That's what's happening. Right. Mini rant over. Right. So we heard from Amber Rudd, the Work and Pensions Secretary who resigned. Her former cabinet colleague, Dominic Raab, the current Foreign Secretary, hasn't much sympathy for Amber Rudd or for her fellow rebels. Here he was speaking with Sophie Ridge on Sky News this morning.
But I think in fairness, when she took the cabinet role, everyone was asked, do you accept and can you sign up to and will you support the Prime Minister's plan to leave by the end of October, preferably with a deal, but if not, come what may. And we all accepted that. And I think the Prime Minister was right to restore some discipline. And I think he's right to expect it from his top team.
And the 21 rebels fired last week?
This was because they voted for motions and legislation that gave Jeremy Corbyn control, it's important for people to understand, control of the business of the House of Commons and control of the negotiations. They were told in advance it would be a confidence issue. So I regret it, but it was their choice. And they did it knowing what the implications would be. First and foremost for the country, that's the real vandalism to democracy that's going on. And second of all, in terms of the whip being withdrawn. So I regret it, and we need to keep the family together. But the Prime Minister was very clear. And one of the reasons with voters that we've seen an increase in support for the Conservatives is I think he's given a clear sense of direction. And now we're going to stick to the plan.
At the same time, though, you've kicked out former chancellors, people like Ken Clarke, who became an MP when Boris Johnson was 5 years old, people like Philip Hammond, who until 6 weeks ago, before he was kicked out, was the chancellor, people like David Gauke, who was the first time he's ever broken the whip. I mean, how many times have you ever broken the Conservative whip?
Well, not on an issue of confidence, and I've never...
Considerably more times than David Gauke.
Well, no, but I've never voted to give...
You have voted on some big issues.
Sophie, let me answer the question. I have never voted to give Jeremy Corbyn control of the legislative agenda in the House of Commons or control over the Brexit negotiations. These are all decent people. I like them, I respect them. But it was right that the discipline was restored because they knew what they were doing. And I think the one thing we've got to have... You said that you referred to status. I don't think your status in the party is the key issue. The question is whether you keep to your promises and you understand our promises we all made at the 2017 election, our manifesto. And you understand when you go into a vote like that, where it was very clear how serious this was, giving Jeremy Corbyn that control over the House of Commons, over the Brexit negotiations. They did what they did knowingly. And I think Boris Johnson was right, and I say this with regret, in sorry not in anger.
Dominic Raab. And on the prospect of Boris Johnson breaking the law, and just in case you don't know what that means, Parliament passed an act. It was approved. It was given consent It was approved in the House of Lords, and it has received or will receive royal assent. So it's law that he cannot take the country out of the European Union with no deal on October 31st. This is when they voted several times last week, initially voting to allow Jeremy Corbyn and the opposition parties to take control of the business of the House of Commons. When they were allowed to do that, incredibly, by the Speaker, John Bercow, they then proposed this legislation that ties Johnson's hands and prevents him leaving with no deal. They won that. So as it stands, if Johnson cannot get a deal with the European Union before October the 31st, he is legally bound not to leave. And he has been told, and it's in law, that he must ask for an extension. But if you believe some of the Sunday newspapers this morning, Boris Johnson is saying that he will ignore that and that he will not seek any extension. And Dominic Raab, the Foreign Secretary, takes this point up with Sophie Ridge now.
Do you accept that the legislation passed by Parliament, the law passed by Parliament, compels Boris Johnson to ask for an extension rather than seek a no deal if he can't get a deal?
Well, first of all, the key thing with an extension is it requires agreement on both sides. I think it's very difficult for the legislation to micromanage in detail how that conversation will go. We will adhere to the law, but we'll also, because this is such a bad piece of legislation, the surrender bill that Jeremy Corbyn backed, we also want to test to the limit what it does actually lawfully require.
So what does that mean then? What does that mean?
We will look very carefully at the implications and our interpretation of it to make sure...
In the courts, do you mean?
No, I mean, actually, across the board, we will look very carefully, legally, at what it requires and what it doesn't require. I think that's not only the lawful thing to do, it's also the responsible thing to do. And again, I'll repeat, that legislation is lousy. It envisages multiple delays. It would effectively try and force us to accept conditions from the EU, however vindictive, punitive or harsh they may be. And if we ended up extending, Prime Minister's made clear he will not do it, it would cost the UK taxpayer, gross figure, £1 billion each month. That's just a lousy piece of legislation.
The Prime Minister will not extend in any circumstances, is that what you're saying?
He's been very clear about it this week.
So in that he would either ignore the legislation put forward or he would resign?
We're always going to behave lawfully as a government. Of course, you'd expect that. And anyway, it will be challenged in the courts. But what we are going to do with that legislation is test very carefully what it does and doesn't require. And that's not only the lawful thing to do, I think it's the responsible thing to do. The irresponsible thing to do was to support that legislation, which weakens our negotiating position in Brussels.
Are you prepared to take it to the courts to test it, if that's what it takes?
We can't necessarily control that. The people at various points challenged the government over Brexit. We had 2 legal challenges last week alone, but we won both of those. But these things need to be looked at very carefully.
So you're effectively saying that you are prepared to ignore this law that's been passed and then be challenged on it in the courts if that's what it takes?
As you know, Sophie, that's not what I said. What I said is we're going to look at it very carefully, test what it legally requires and what it doesn't require, and that's the responsible thing to do because it's such a bad piece of legislation. And I think it was deeply irresponsible for Jeremy Corbyn to put his weight behind it. He's trying to drag this country into the quicksand.
And Jeremy Corbyn's brother, Piers Corbyn, has been on this programme several times, and I'm in touch with Piers, and I've made a couple of private, not so much apologies, but I've left him know a couple of times because I know that Piers pays attention to programmes like this. And I've said to him a couple of times over the last couple of years, my characterisation of your brother and his politics and his Brexit position is not personal because I've never met the man, don't know anything about him. Knew him, of course, as somebody who's been very interested in the Palestine question for many years, the apartheid. I knew that Corbyn was outspoken on behalf of the people of Palestine, but I never knew him. And I would let Piers Corbyn know that, and I did say it a couple of times, it's not personal. But this week, Piers Corbyn has gone on the offensive and has taken on his brother on Twitter, as I know many of you have noticed, and accused him of being part of a Europhile establishment and Brexit blocker and all the rest of it. I've said it 1,000 times. Socialism. And there isn't a single socialist sitting at Westminster today. There couldn't be. This country has never had a socialist government. Neither has mine in Ireland. No socialist in the world could support in conscience membership of the European Union. And I won't get into that in too much depth because I have before. So that was Dominic Raab then. The papers are full of this. There's no point me reading all the headlines. The Observer goes with fresh crisis for Johnson as Amber Rudd quits cabinet. Same again. The Sunday Express, Boris threat to paralyse the European Union. You've just heard that, the notion that he might ignore the law and not ask for an extension and try to force through a no deal by Halloween. You heard that there. The Mail on Sunday, Andrew in raging bust-up with top royal aide. Kind of an intriguing story on the front page of the Mail on Sunday because it doesn't give too much detail, but it hints at stuff. Apparently, Prince Andrew, Jeffrey Epstein's pal, had such an argument, such a raging bust-up as it's described by the Mail, with a royal aide that Charlie Boy, Prince Charles, had to ask him to apologise. The paper's source said the Duke of York and the aide exchanged heated words, but there was no physical altercation. Apparently some observers or some journalists are suggesting there was some physical row, there was some coming to blows between this guy Andrew and one of the royal aides. Kind of intriguing. What could it have been about, maybe? And also on the Mail on Sunday front page is the story, Boris said I could bring up his secret baby. Mad stuff, this. A guy called William Cash has written a book called Restoration Heart. And he's told this story about how Boris Johnson agreed to let him, William Cash, raise his daughter before it all ended up in acrimony and tears. And William Cash was in a relationship with Helen McIntyre before she got together with Boris Johnson. Or after she was with Boris Johnson. Yeah, that would make sense. And she had a child, and she told this guy, William Cash, that Boris was her daughter's father. And they wanted to keep this a secret. So the guy, William Cash, agreed to help bring up Stephanie, the daughter, and even prepared to raise her as his own. It's a kind of I wouldn't say a scandal story, but it's kind of a soap opera story on the front page of the Mail on Sunday. The time is 27 and a half minutes past the hour. Going to take a musical interlude. Going to have a wee drop of water. When we come back, we'll hear from one or two of the Labour grandees. The Labour grandees talking about this whole Brexit thing, which is dominating the papers today and thereby or therefore dominating this programme as well. So we'll do that. We'll have a look at Shami Chakrabarti, and we'll hear from John McDonnell as well in a couple of minutes. And I'll be reading your comments when I come back on Sunday View with me, Richie Allen, for September the 8th. This is Morrissey. Love this. Vauxhall and I, one of the albums to listen to before you die. Yeah. Could have been a poet myself, produced by Steve Lillywhite. It's one of the most beautiful albums. That's one of the greatest songs ever written, that. Now My Heart Is Full. Anyway, subjective and all that. Thanks for your tweets. Hi to Celia Moore. How you doing, Celia Moore? Hi to These Are the Damned, to Desmond Knox, to Gail, to Liz Jones. Acker Firmage. How you doing, Acker Firmage? How you doing? Most people experiencing dry and bright weather in Blighty today, despite the fact it's a bit chillier than it has been. Faisal tweets, Amber Rudd makes no sense. How can Johnson negotiate a deal if the bargaining position is sabotaged by taking no deal off the table? That is truth right there. It's always been the case. Hi to Tom M. How you doing, Tom? Thanks, Tom. Nice to hear from you, pal. Appreciate that. Let me scroll up there. Lots and lots of tweets. You know you can engage with listeners to the programme on Twitter by putting Richie Allen Show where it says search Twitter. Put Richie Allen Show, all one word. Press enter. You'll see what people are tweeting to me. Hi to Stephen James, who says, they keep calling Johnson the PM. He's only been elected by 160,000 Tory members. Democracy? Asks Steve. Well, of course not, Steve. We don't live in a democracy. I'm tired of saying it. I am. I'm boring myself. Let me just give you a few facts. This is important because when all is said and done, the United Kingdom is not going to leave the European Union in any meaningful way. It cannot be allowed. Okay, and we've gotten into that so many times over the years, long before the referendum. I mean, anybody who's been listening to this program, or even my programs in London or the programs I made in Spain, long before there was any announcement of a referendum here, people like me were doing their level best to explain to others in a way that wouldn't isolate them or wouldn't push them away, kind of a non-dogmatic way, just what it is the European Union is and where it is eventually meant to go. So park your identity, and that includes me as well with my socialist identity. Park it to one side. You're not a conservative. You're not an alt-right supporter. You're not a lefty. You're not a socialist. You're not a liberal. You're not an anarcho-capitalist. You're a fucking human being. That's what you are. You're a unique person. Oh, absolutely unique. Among billions, you are unique. There's nobody like you. You have the capacity to think for yourselves, to understand things for yourself without being influenced by a group of people as to what you should think or how you should feel. That's not to say it's not a bad thing to listen to people and speak to people whose views might align with your own, but you have the capacity to totally understand any subject matter yourself and reach conclusions of your own volition. You can do that. Eschew, I love that word, eschew the identity. You're not gay, you're not straight, you're not... I'm going to sound like Ike here. But if there was one thing I always agreed with David Icke on, it was you are a being of light. Having this experience, you are completely unique. So you can eschew your identity. You're neither black nor white nor brown nor pale-skinned. You're neither Catholic nor Protestant nor Muslim nor Jewish. You're none of that shit. That's a program that somebody fed to you and that you swallowed or that you assigned yourself to. Think for yourself. The European Union. Forget what you think now about your holidays in Spain. Forget about what you think about studying overseas. Forget about your mum and dad who've got a home in Benidorm. Leave all that shit, that narcissistic, selfish shit to one side and listen for 2 minutes. The European Union has a flag, it has a parliament, it has an anthem, it has presidents plural, it has a currency, it has a legal system, it has a navy, and the military is on the way soon, the European Union Army. That offends one of your identities, does it? I couldn't give a shit, because facts are not disposable and facts are not subjective, neither are they objective. They are just facts. Flag, parliament, anthem, ode to joy, president's currency, legal system, navy, military, army is on the way. That's it. It's game over right there. When you're arguing with somebody who laughs when you talk about sovereignty. The people who make laws in the European Union, the people who matter, are unelected. You have no say in who they will be, who they are, who they were, none. And because of that, they are completely unaccountable to you. We're talking about the European Union Commission here, the executive branch, which proposes legislation, upholds the European Union treaties, and basically manages the European Union from top to bottom. Unelected. All of them. All of them. Tony Benn said it donkeys years ago. But in Europe, said Tony Benn, all the key positions are appointed, not elected. The Commission, for example, all appointed, not one of them elected, says Tony Benn. Yes, Tony! And if the people responsible for proposing legislation, implementing decisions, and upholding the European Union treaties, if they are unelected, where do they draw their inspiration from? Where do they draw their inspiration from? What laws will we come up with this week? Who do you think they're listening to? Who? These people who draft legislation, propose it, sends it to the European Union Parliament, who really can't do anything about it because the Parliament has no say whatsoever. It's window dressing. The 751 MEPs are made to look like it's a democratic institution. They are there to convince you that you're voting for your local MEP. But they don't get to propose legislation. They're basically window dressers. You might hate Nigel Farage. You might think there's good reason to hate him. You might despise him. Fair enough. But he's not telling lies when he says it is the most undemocratic, anti-democratic, fascistic organisation on planet Earth. We, says Farage a million times, the MEPs are window dressers. We don't do anything. We don't propose laws. We don't propose legislation. We don't manage the business of the European Union. We're just there to take laws given to us by the executive and to vote on them. That's how it works. So where do they draw their inspiration from? Where do they get the ideas? Where do they get the inspiration, these unelected commissioners, when they think about, well, what will we come up with next? What law will we write? Will we draft? Will we impose on this section of European society? Who do you think they're listening to? Who? I'm going to read you something from a left-wing website called Labour Heartlands. So, Jeremy Corbyn supporters who've got Twitter accounts declaring yourselves to be socialists, wax your fucking ears and listen to this. This is from a left-wing website called Labour Heartlands. The European Union is one of the chief enemies of democratic politics, and therefore the mass of people in the world today. Its central purpose is to constrain popular sovereignty through an executive-heavy, often secretive complex of organisations. It has no fewer than 5 presidents, makes key decisions behind closed doors with no recorded minutes, has a parliament that is its weakest branch and renders amending its basic constitutional features nearly impossible. That's from a left-wing website called Labour Heartlands. The power in the European Union is in the hands of this unelected elite who make laws in secret. Who do they make laws in secret on behalf of? You? Do you fucking think so? That they're in secret in their offices in Brussels and Strasbourg and they're making laws in secret and you think they're doing it for your benefit? Eh? Really? They're doing it for the biggest multinational corporations on planet Earth, who achieve their aims by spending enormous amounts of money on lobbying, to the detriment of small businesses in your cities and in your towns, in Ireland, in England, in France, in Belgium, in Spain and in Portugal, because they can't compete with that. Small businesses can't compete with it. Small businesses don't have lobbyists in Brussels. 28 unelected commissioners, folks, that's how it works. You can't hold them to account. Nothing you can do. And the parliament, I'm going to say again, is not a real parliament. They have no right to propose laws. None. Imagine a parliament. Yeah, but you don't have any right to propose laws. We'll make the laws and you'll just pass them when you're told to pass them. And the narcissistic, fact-shy, millennial fucking snowflakes on social media who spend all their lives there, they don't want to hear this. Don't want to hear it. That it's a tyranny. The 28 commissioners hold all the power, making laws in secret, lobbied by the biggest multinationals on planet Earth, driving small businesses out of business. And that's the European Union. And nothing in that mini tirade there could be construed as conjecture or feelings or opinion. It is fact. And it is something you never hear on national television in the UK, nor on national radio. The television and radio programmes and companies go out of their way to prevent any serious discussion of what the European Union is. They have gatekeepers like James O'Brien on LBC, like Kay Burley on Sky, like Fiona Bruce on the BBC. Gatekeepers. Keep it all general. Keep it all hostile. Keep it very confrontational, the discussions between the left and the right. Keep it all very emotive and very fucking angry. What we mustn't do is keep it calm, keep it level-headed, and give real time to people to explain just how all of this really works. Do you know, it staggers me that so-called awakened independent media types still believe that the elites want the United Kingdom to leave the European Union and that they want the European Union to break up. Otherwise, we wouldn't have had this result back in 2016. The European Union, with its flag and its monetary, its fiscal alignment, its single currency, its anthems, its army, its navy, is a gigantic founding block, foundation of the coming one world government. Listen to the Council on Foreign Relations, Richard Haas. This future where sovereign nations are whimsical, they are a distant memory. In the past, wow, remember 20 years ago when countries had elected parliaments nationally, where politicians came together nationally to decide what was in the best interest. Well, that never happened, of course. In the best interest of their countries. Well, not anymore. Now, we have a borderless future with executives, not just in Brussels, but eventually you'll have these alignments, you'll have these unions in America, you'll have them in Asia, you'll have them in Africa. You'll have 3 or 4 maybe. And from 3 or 4 you'll have 2, and ultimately you'll have 1. It'll be a distant memory. Sovereignty. A country, a government put there by the people to do whatever is in the best interest of the country and the people of that country. Distant memory. So the European Union will never break up. It will get stronger. And of course, the United Kingdom will never leave it in any meaningful way. Not conjecture. Fact. And what we're seeing now is the end of it. The death of it. The death of Brexit. It's, like I said earlier on, it's like the wounded animal begging to be put out of its misery. Thrashing around on the ground. Can't move, can't get up. It's over now. And everything now that happens in the next 3 or 4 weeks is incidental. It doesn't matter. Back to the talk shows momentarily. You've heard from the Conservatives. Let's hear from Shadow Attorney General Shami Chakrabarti. But before we hear from her, let's hear from the Shadow Chancellor John McDonnell. John McDonnell was on the Marr show. Marr suggested to him, the reason you don't want an election is because you're scared you won't win one. You're scared that Labour can't win. Here's John McDonnell. At least I thought we had John McDonnell. Let's try that again. John McDonnell, are you scared of an election?
No. I want an election. I want it as soon as we possibly can. But sometimes you do have to put the country before party. And the key thing for me now, and I think it isn't just me, it's across the opposition parties and within the Conservative Party itself, is we've got to prevent Boris Johnson forcing through a no deal because of the damage it could do for our country.
So let's be very explicit. You think that despite the Act of Parliament will come into force next week, Boris Johnson would simply run the clock out and leave without a deal while pretending that it was all about an election?
Potentially, and it looks like, from what Amber Rudd has just said, the lack of preparation for a deal and the concentration on a no deal, looks as though that's his strategy. I echo what you've said early on in this programme, is that I think we're in an extremely serious constitutional position, and now's the time to put party advantage to one side and concentrate on the seriousness of the situation we're in.
If you don't believe Boris Johnson, you could sort that out by legislating for the date of an election. The House of Commons can deal with this tomorrow.
We don't believe that we can pin him down, and I don't trust him an inch, and I don't think anyone does. I think that we've got a Prime Minister now who's saying he won't even abide by the law. By the law? I've never heard that before. Now, we're in a situation now where no one can trust while he's in place, what can happen. So what we've got to do now is use every mechanism we possibly can to rule out a no deal.
Right.
And that's what we're trying to legislate on as best we can. But also, once we've got to that situation, we can then, I think, that's the time we can have a general election.
Well, yeah, now John McDonnell then reminded Andrew Marr that if Labour won the next election, Labour would have a people's vote on Brexit. A people's vote with two choices. Choice one, any deal agreed with the European Union, versus choice two, remain. So that's what McDonnell said. If we win, we'll have a referendum. The choices will be any deal that we might agree with the European Union versus remain. But what about no deal? To be fair, Andrew Marr asks him that.
So this proposed Labour referendum after the next election completely cuts out the views of all of those people who want to leave without a deal. Or, as it were, the hard Brexiteers get no chance at all. There's nothing on the ballot paper for them. They're pushed to one side.
We have to be honest with people. I can't support a no deal, and I think it would be so damaging for the country. I don't believe it's a realistic offer.
And you're not going to give people the chance to disagree with you?
Well, I think that I'd like to give them the chance in a general election as soon as we possibly can, and then we'd have a referendum. But I have to exercise the judgment that actually is exercised by so many people now that no deal would be an absolute disaster.
So let's talk about the Labour Party's official policy, because I've had lots of Labour figures sitting in that chair saying that they are in favour of Remain. In the end, they think remaining in the EU is the best deal available to Britain. And yet, time and time again, when it comes to the manifesto, the Labour Party manifesto is, as it were, a pro-Brexit manifesto. I've got a graphic here of the last two manifestos. 2017, we will seek to unite the country around a Brexit deal. And 2019 European elections, we believe such a deal, a Brexit deal, could bring our country back together. In other words, when it comes to the actual motion of the party at high levels to work out what's in the manifesto, you stick with a Brexit deal.
Well, also in that manifesto, we said very, very clearly we would not support a no-deal Brexit. And that's what we've done. So our position, let me just go through it, because this is quite important.
This is madness now. Wait till you hear what McDonnell says next.
Because this is quite important so people understand. All our efforts at the moment is to prevent a no-deal Brexit, because it would be so damaging to the living standards of our people, their jobs and the economy overall. That's our focus at the moment. We're saying, of course we are, that actually there would be an offer in terms of a Brexit proposal, a deal of some sort that will come. But many of us believe Remain is the best deal. So the people should decide. Let the people decide.
Let the people decide, he said. What John McDonnell said there, and it's very interesting, it's very important you pick up on that. He said no deal would not be offered to the electorate in the event of a second referendum. So if there is a second referendum, it'll be between some hypothetical deal with the European Union against remaining, effectively. And he said, and you must have heard it, that he'd negotiate a deal with the European Union, but then he'd campaign to remain after securing that deal. Now, we heard this nonsense last week from his mate, the Shadow Foreign Secretary. We'll come back to that. Incredulity all around here.
I would campaign for Remain.
So
but we've got
this deal or Remain?
I think it's a matter of saying, look, this is what the offer is. That's the reality of what the European Union are willing to agree. The alternative to that is to remain. And people across party, and this, I don't think this is a party political thing. I think this is a thing across parties, that people have to judge what is in the best interest of the country. For me, I believe Remain is in the best interest of the country, but others will take a different view, even within my own party.
So you'll go to the European Union, you'll negotiate a deal, you'll get a deal with them, you shake hands on it, and then you'll come back to Parliament and you'll campaign to Remain.
This is a slightly strange position.
It's very strange, all right.
If I may say so. You go over, you negotiate, and you come back, and you don't put the results of your negotiation to the British people as the favoured option. You put Remain as the favoured option. In which case, if you're the EU, why negotiate?
No, you have to be honest with people and say, look, this is the offer that's available to us.
You have to be honest with people.
And this is the offer that Parliament is willing to agree to. But there will be, in any individual party, differences of view. And this is what's happened in past referenda.
If you're the EU and you know that John McDonnell and the Labour Party want to remain and are going to ask the British people to remain, why would you give them any kind of deal at all? There is no pressure on them to give us anything.
The EU will know that to get anything through at the moment in terms of popular support within the country, they would have to present an offer that is actually acceptable across all parties, not just one individual party. And that's the situation we're in.
What a joke, eh? We'll get a good deal with the European Union. We'll stay in the customs union and single market, which isn't Brexit. We'll get that deal, but then we'll campaign to remain anyway. And I mentioned his mate, the equally ridiculous Shadow Foreign Secretary Emily Thornberry. She was on BBC Question Time last Thursday evening, and she was hammered by the panel and by the host for saying the exact same thing. You couldn't make this up.
You would go back to Europe, try and get a better deal, have a referendum where Remain is an option. Would you then be campaigning against your own deal to remain? Against your own deal that you probably would have negotiated? Or would you be actually saying, no, support our deal? I mean, if I'm confused, I don't know. Which is it? Briefly. Okay, briefly. Are you going to campaign for your deal, assuming you get one, assuming you
I think
get
we've
into
had our
power?
answer.
Or will you campaign for Remain against your own deal?
Personally, I will campaign to remain.
Even if you've negotiated the
I
deal?
will negotiate to the best of my ability a deal that will look after jobs and the economy, but the best way of
And then
looking
you'll
after
campaign
jobs and the
against it.
economy is for us to remain.
Do you have any idea how ridiculous that sounds? That everybody you think people are going to vote for you on that basis? Have you no shame?
Have you any idea how the European Union are going to treat us if we negotiate in that way? Can you give us a nice deal, please? And then I'm going to vote not to have it in the first place. utterly ridiculous.
Yeah, Ian Dale from LBC was weighing in there. I don't know who the other guy was. That's about the size of it, you see. It ain't happening. I've been asked by my learned friend and colleague Jean-Anne Crowley to predict how it's going to play out in the next couple of weeks. Well, Boris Johnson has said, and I suppose we'll have to paraphrase here, he'd rather die in a ditch or something like that, or be found dead in a ditch, rather than ask the European Union for an extension until the end of next January. But he has been compelled to do so now in law by an act of Parliament. It's the law that he must do that in the event that he can't get a deal. That's where it is at the moment. Johnson gets to go to a summit in October where he'll meet European Union leaders and negotiators. And that will effectively be the last chance to get a deal. There won't be any deal because the European Union knows it's won. There won't be any deal. Right? Won't be any deal. So Johnson has been told now by Parliament, and it is law, that in the event you don't come to some arrangement with the European Union, you must then, by law, ask them to give you an extension. I'm on the Shami Chakrabartis, and I'm not going to subject you to her, and Thornberry and Jeremy Corbyn and John McDonnell, all the phony socialists. What they've been saying is, once we have that extension guaranteed, then we're happy to go for a general election and go back to the people and all the rest of it. So what does Boris Johnson do? Does he ignore the Act of Parliament and say, well, no, I'm not going to ask for an extension. We are going to leave on October 31st, deal or no deal? I don't think so. And while I'm absolutely convinced that the UK will not leave the European Union, it's not going to happen. It's dying. It's in the death throes now, taking its last gasp. Any idea, any notion that we would leave. What will happen? It's difficult to say, really. I suppose if I had to have a fiver on it, at some stage in the next couple of weeks, Boris Johnson might very well resign as Prime Minister, and throw his hands up to the country and say, right, look, they won't give me a general election. They should do. They've been begging for one for years. They don't want one now because they're Europhiles. They want to overturn the democratically mandated result of 2016. They want to overturn it, so they won't give me an election. They are playing on the side of the European Union. Therefore, the only way I can get an election, I think, is to resign and make a chaotic situation even more chaotic and even more ludicrous. And that might happen in the next couple of weeks, but don't take my word for it. I couldn't, guarantee that. I don't know what's going to happen. I tell you what's going to happen now. We're going to say adieu. We're going to say adios, and I'm going to love you and leave you. That was Sunday View. Very Brexit-centric, but that's what the newspapers and the mid-morning talk shows have been talking about today. I'll be back with you tomorrow morning at 9:30 on YouTube in the AM for the newspaper review programme, which is a bit of fun on YouTube. It's not serious. And the radio show is on air, of course, tomorrow, Monday at 5 o'clock on the usual channels. Thanks to everybody who tweeted. Thanks for listening. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday. Have a lovely Sunday. Leaving you with the great Satchmo, Louis Armstrong on your Richie Allen Show. Signing off. Bye for now. Speak tomorrow. Bye.